The first thing our app needs is a computer, and on AWS, that computer is an EC2 instance. EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. Somewhere in an AWS data center, there is a real physical server with a lot of CPU cores and a lot of memory. A small program called a hypervisor splits that server into several virtual machines, and one of them is your instance. Let's say you pick an instance with 2 cores and 8 gigabytes of memory. From inside, it looks like a normal Linux machine, but those 2 cores are not the whole server. The same physical machine might have 64 cores and the other 62 belong to other customers' instances, all running next to yours. This setup has one problem. Every instance on that server is constantly sending network packets and writing to disk, and somebody has to move all of those bytes between the virtual machines and the real hardware. On a classic hypervisor, that work runs on the same CPU cores your app is using, so basically your neighbor's traffic takes away part of your compute time. So to solve this problem, AWS moved that work onto separate hardware. Every server has a few extra cards inside it, called Nitro cards. One handles the network, one handles the storage, and a small security chip checks that the server boots clean firmware. So the hypervisor left on the main CPU has almost nothing to do except hand out cores and memory. Your code runs on that CPU basically alone, and this is the whole reason an EC2 instance feels like bare metal. Okay, we have a server, but packets have to get to it somehow, so we need a network. A VPC, a virtual private cloud, is your own private network inside AWS. You pick a range of IP addresses and you split it into subnets. Then you write rules. This subnet can reach the internet, this one can only talk to other subnets, and this instance accepts traffic only on port 443. On your own hardware, those rules would live in a physical router and a firewall. On AWS, they get pushed down to the Nitro networking card on every single server. When your instance sends a packet to another instance, the card wraps it inside another packet, adds the address of the physical host on the other side, and sends it over the shared AWS network. The card on the receiving host unwraps it and checks your security group rules before it hands the packet to the instance. This happens for every packet, and your instance only ever sees its own private network. The app is running and reachable. Users start uploading photos, so we need a place for files. On AWS, that place is S3, the simple storage service. To store a file in that storage, you just send a put request with a key and the bytes of the file. To retrieve the photo, you need to send a get request with the same key. Every write replaces the whole object, so if you want to change one byte, you upload the whole file again. S3 is designed for 11 nines of durability. That means 99.9 with 8 more nines after it. You're probably wondering how anyone can promise that when disks fail every day. When you upload a photo, it gets cut into blocks, let's say 14. Then S3 computes 6 extra blocks from them, so now we have 20 blocks, and any 14 out of the 20 are enough to rebuild the photo. This technique is called erasure coding. Then each of those 20 blocks goes to a different disk, spread across at least 3 separate buildings. If a week later one of those disks dies and 2 of your blocks are gone with it, that doesn't matter, because S3 only needs 14 blocks to rebuild the photo and it still has 18. So it rebuilds the missing 2 and writes them onto a fresh disk, and you never even find out that it happened. Photos are in S3, but users, orders, and accounts need a relational database. RDS, the Relational Database Service, is a normal Postgres or MySQL process running on an EC2 instance that you cannot log into. You get a hostname and a port, and you connect like you would to any database. What you pay for is everything around that process. RDS takes backups on a schedule and applies patches during a maintenance window. And if you turn on multi-AZ, it runs a second copy in another availability zone. Every write goes to the primary and to the standby at the same time, and your transaction is confirmed only when both copies have it on disk. When the primary dies, RDS promotes the standby and changes the DNS record for your hostname so it points to the new server. Your app reconnects, resolves the same name, and lands on the new primary. The whole switch usually takes between 60 and 120 seconds. Some data does not fit a relational database well, for example, a shopping cart that gets read on every page load. For that, we use DynamoDB, a key value database. Every item has a partition key, for example, a user ID. When you write an item, DynamoDB runs that key through a hash function, and the result tells it which storage node holds the item. When you read by the same key, the same hash points to the same node. So a lookup is one hop to one machine, with no query planner in between. That is why a read takes single-digit milliseconds whether the table has 1,000 items or 10 billion. It is also why you have to know your access patterns up front. If you want to find carts by date instead of by user ID, the hash gives you nothing, and you need a separate index. Each partition is copied onto 3 storage nodes in 3 availability zones. One of them is the leader, and a write is confirmed as soon as 2 out of 3 copies have it on disk. A default read can be served by any node, including the one still catching up, so for a few milliseconds it can return the previous version of your cart. A strongly consistent read always goes to the leader, and AWS charges twice as much for it. Every time a user uploads a photo, we want to make a thumbnail. That is a job that runs for a second and then has nothing to do. So spinning up an entire EC2 instance for this just doesn't make sense. Lambda lets you upload just the function, and AWS runs it when an event shows up. Behind the scenes, each function runs inside a tiny virtual machine. To make this work, Amazon custom built a virtual machine monitor called Firecracker, which can spin up a new micro VM in just 125 milliseconds. When that first upload event triggers, Lambda initializes the environment, loads your runtime and code, and executes the handler. That first call is slow because of the boot and the load, and this delay is what people call a cold start. After the handler finishes, Lambda keeps the micro VM warm for a while. If the next upload arrives soon, it reuses the same environment and skips the startup, but you have no control over when it gets thrown away. So anything you keep in memory or on the local disk might be there on the next call, or it might be gone. Our servers live in one region, for example Frankfurt. A user in Tokyo asking for a photo has to wait for a round trip across the planet. CloudFront fixes this with a cache. AWS runs more than 700 edge locations, which are small data centers in cities all over the world. When the user in Tokyo asks for the photo, DNS resolves your domain to the edge location closest to them. If that edge has the photo, it sends it right back from a few kilometers away. If it does not, the edge fetches it once from your S3 bucket in Frankfurt, keeps a copy, and every other user near Tokyo gets that copy. You control exactly how long the edge location caches the file. Your origin sends a cache control header with each response, and CloudFront follows it. CloudFront only holds responses and hands them out. Your application code still runs in Frankfurt. Every call we made so far, the request to S3, the write to DynamoDB, the event that started the Lambda, went through one more service first. IAM, Identity and Access Management, decides who is allowed to do what. Every request to an AWS API carries a signature. Your code signs the request with a secret access key, and AWS checks the signature to figure out who sent it. Then it looks at the policies attached to that identity. The starting answer for every request is deny. If a policy has an explicit allow for that action on that resource, the request goes through. If any policy has an explicit deny, it is blocked even when another policy allows it. You should never put those access keys in your code. Instead, you attach a role to the EC2 instance or to the Lambda function. When your code asks the SDK to call S3, the SDK asks a local address on the instance for credentials, gets a temporary set that works for a few hours, and signs the request with that. AWS rotates them automatically, so a leaked server leaks a key that stops working the same day. I get asked all the time about how I build my animations, so if you want to learn how to do it yourself, check the link in the description.